record on this computer. Perfect. Welcome to the talk and panel discussion, The Know-How of Starting Your CellAg Career, joined by Beck Scarenci and Dr. James Ryle from the Australian cultivated meat startup, VOW. First, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from the land of the Taungurung people of the Kulin Nations. I acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging of the Aboriginal people of this land and all over Australia, as we are joined by people from around the country today. My name is Marian, and I'm a Master of Biotech student, and I will be your MC today. We've also got Marcella and Dawson helping out behind the scenes as well. So give them a wave, team. All right, so the Alternative Protein Initiative is a student-led group that aims to generate interest and excitement in the field at our university and the public. Our long-term vision is to build a healthy, sustainable, and just food system by creating a vibrant and robust community for alternative protein research, innovation, and entrepreneurship, starting from the University of Melbourne. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to follow us on our Facebook page where we post upcoming events. And we're also looking for new committee members, so send us a message if you're interested in getting involved, and there will be more information on the recruitment process coming in the next few weeks. All right, so this event is in collaboration with the University of Melbourne Biotechnology Club, so thanks for joining us today, and go check them out as well for any biotech-related events. Thanks to everyone that has shared this event. There's been many clubs and societies that did this. It's awesome to see interested people coming together to think about alternative proteins and how we can solve this pending protein problem together. So a huge welcome to Beck Scarenci and Dr. James Ryle, who are here today to talk about the startup VOW, cultivated meat in general, and career pathways into cellular agriculture. So there will be 2 talks followed by panel discussions and an open Q&A. So you can submit your questions on Slido throughout the talk, and they will be asked during the panel discussions. Check the chat for the link. You will also be able to raise your hand during the panel discussion and ask your questions directly. But for now, make sure to keep your microphones off during the presentations, and this session is recorded, and the recording will be made available later on. We'll post the details of this on the event page. Great. Now I'd like to introduce you to the first speaker, Dr. James Ryle. So James was awarded his PhD in skeletal muscle physiology in 2006 at the University of Melbourne. He was awarded the NH and MRC prestigious research fellowship in 2008 and worked in the National Institute of Health until 2013. His work focused on the basic biology of skeletal muscle stem cells and the process of muscle regeneration. He returned to the University of Melbourne in 2013 as a scientist within the Center for Muscle Research. Dr. Ryle joined VOW in 2019 as their Chief Scientific Officer and helped build a science team from 1 to 15 researchers responsible for solving the many challenges of producing cultivated meat at a scale to feed billions of people. Thanks for joining us, James.
Lovely to be here and nice to be presenting in front of a group of people from Uni Melb again. I'm excited to be almost back home, virtually anyway. All right, let me share my screen. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about, first of all, about what VOW is and what it is that we do at VOW. And then I want to sort of briefly go through my path from working in academia into industry. And then finally, I'd like to spend maybe just a few minutes at the very end trying to give you an rough idea of what it is, what it's like to work at a startup and what the role of a CSO is at a startup. And then I'll hand it over to Beck. So look, VOW is a collective of, it's not really a biotech company, it's not really a food company, and it's not an engineering company, it's almost all of those things all together. VOW is currently about 35 people. I say about because we are hiring at such a rapid rate that I actually don't know exactly how many people we currently have at VOW. We had 4 new people start today. As I said, we're a collective of biologists, chemists, engineers, chefs, bioprocess experts, And we've got an incredible operations team, which support us and keep us going. But all of us are working towards this same mission of trying to redefine the way that we think about food. And to do that, we're using a technology called cultured meat. One of the things that makes Vow unique and different to many of the cultured meat companies around the world at the moment is that we look at cells as ingredients. So we're looking at getting as many different ingredients as we possibly can. So we're talking about different cell types. So we're focused on not just muscle stem cells, but a whole range of different cell types. And we're looking at getting those cells from different species as well. So whilst the vast amount of meat that you eat comes from 4 different animals, we're really keen on focusing beyond those 4. That when we talk about cultured meat, we're no longer limited by what can be produced in standard agriculture. So to do this, to produce cultured meat, that we start by selecting the best cells, and we do that by using FACS, fluorescence activated cell sorting, to sort out individual cells. We then look at the best performing cells, which we take forward into our pipeline to develop a product. We are then able to develop novel media formulations to support rapid cell growth of these cells. And so there's a lot of cell culture that we do, and we use something called design of experiments to look at a huge number of ingredients and how those different ingredients interact with each other. And then we look at growing the cells at a really large scale. So this involves bioprocess optimization. We need to understand that the temperature that we grow the cells at, the gas exchange rates, all of these things change when we start growing cells at the density and the scale that we're trying to achieve. And again, we optimize this process using this design of experiments technique. And then finally, we create a brand new type of food. So we take our cells and we mix it with plant-based ingredients to create a whole new type of food, something that you've not tasted before. So the challenge with the challenge with other cultured meat companies is that they're trying to offer you something that is already available to you in an animal-based product. If you take a chicken nugget and you eat that chicken nugget, you know what a chicken nugget should taste like. And so if a company offers you a chicken nugget from cultured meat and it doesn't taste like the chicken nugget you're used to, you're not going to go back and eat that one again. What Vow's trying to do is give you a brand new type of food that you've never tasted before so that you've got nothing to compare it to. So instead, you're going to focus on whether this is an amazingly tasty product or not. And that's where we're going to win, is that we're going to produce something that you're going to eat and you're going to say, this is incredible. This is better than something I've had before. So that's a bit about Vow. I'll give you a sort of a really quick intro to my background. I've spent about 20 years working and studying across academia. Yeah, after spending 20 years in academia, I jumped ship and moved into industry and became the CSO at Vow. Skeletal muscle is the one constant thread across my whole career. So from my honours degree onwards, I've focused on skeletal muscle. I did my PhD at Melbourne Uni with Professor Gordon Lynch and Associate Professor Paul Grigorevich, who are currently the Director and Deputy Director of the Centre for Muscle Research in the Physiology Department at Melbourne Uni. If you are interested in cultured meat, getting trained in one of the top muscle research centres in Australia is definitely a good thing to be thinking about. They constantly have honours, masters and PhD projects available. So absolutely look to get in touch with either Gordon or Paul as well. After finishing my PhD, I spent 2 years working on a skeletal muscle regeneration project. And that was when I really fell in love with muscle stem cells. It was the first time I ever sort of started working or thinking about muscle stem cells. And that was my first intro to that particular cell type. That 2-year period was when I successfully got my fellowship and was able to move to the US. I spent almost 5 years working at the NIH in the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal Disorders with Vittorio Sartorelli. I really shifted my focus away from physiology to molecular and cellular biology. And I learned a lot of really useful techniques. And a lot of this we still use at VAL today. So thinking about single muscle fiber cultures, FACS isolation of cells. I did a lot of bioinformatics and sequencing and looked at cellular bioenergetics. This was when I first started thinking loosely about cultured meat. And over a beer with a friend, we sort of did a back of the envelope calculation of how much it would cost to produce a burger. And this was in 2012. And we came up with about $800,000 US to produce a single burger. 12 months later, Mosa produced the very first cultured meat burger. And the reported cost there was about 350,000 euro and for 3 burgers. So we weren't too far off in terms of the calculation that we produced. In 2013, I moved back to Australia and I came back to the University of Melbourne, and I spent 6 years working in the Centre for Muscle Research. And my group really focused on how muscle stem cells interact with their metabolic environment. But 2019 was really a bit of a defining year for me. I got married to my lovely wife. I also found out that later that year that my wife was pregnant. And for those of you who have seen ultrasounds before, you can see that there is not one baby in there, but 2 babies. So my wife became pregnant with twins. Also, these are not my twins. This is Tim and George. This is the 2 co-founders of VAL. And I met them in 2019 and really first started having some conversations about VAL and what VAL was doing. So Tim and George sort of came to me after I did a little bit of social media work and radio work around cultured meat. I was interviewed by Radio Australia, ABC Radio Australia, on the topic of cultured meat. This was right around the time that Beyond had their big IPO in early 2019. And that interview got picked up around Australia on a couple of different platforms. So for most of 2019, if you did a Google search for cultured meat and scientists in Australia, then my name was the name that came up. And that was how Tim and George found me, through that kind of search. So we went for a coffee and we chatted about what they were trying to do with VAL. And I said I was super excited to help them out. I wasn't thinking about leaving academia, but I really, really wanted to help get cultured meat as an industry up and running in Australia. I thought there was a really great opportunity to get this industry up and running in Australia. So for the better part of 3 or 4 months, I spoke to Beck, I spoke to the team via Zoom about how I could support them and from a scientific perspective. Towards the end of 2019, Tim and George flew me up to see the operation at VAL. And that was for the first time, that visit was the first time that I really looked at what they were doing and saw it as a really exciting opportunity in terms of what was going on for cultured meat in Australia. I joined VAL because of 3 really, really strong reasons. One, that I had the opportunity to address some of the most interesting questions in cell biology. I love Tim and George's vision for disrupting the food chain and the way that they were approaching things, and just the way that they spoke about their passion for cultured meat and how cultured meat could change the world. And I was also really at a point in my career that I was looking for a brand new challenge. I was very content and very happy with my position at Melbourne Uni. I had was just about to get a fellowship through Melbourne Uni, so I was pretty happy there. But this was going to be a new challenge for me, And that was really exciting. So this is sort of a rough timeline for what Val has achieved. Nothing in here is confidential. It's all publicly available information, but it gives you a rough idea of what the timeline for Val looks like. I don't want to go into the details here, but I think one of the things that you can really see is that just before each of our big raises, we've been able to release or publicly announce an interesting product. And so if you are thinking about going down the route of starting your own company, make sure that you are thinking about really getting a lot of publicity around what you're working on, because it helps drive excitement around your company and your products. And I'm happy to come back to this and talk about it in more detail. One thing I will say is that on the back of our seed raise in late last year, we were able to build our own facility. This science facility is the most amazing facility I've ever had the opportunity to work in. Walking into this environment is just incredible. The glass windows looking into the offices, the plants everywhere. We've got dogs running around inside the offices. It's such a special place. So just quickly, to finish up, what does my job entail as the CSO? I kind of see that it's distinctly split across 3 different phases. The first phase was when I first joined Val. There were 3 scientists, one of which was Beck. Beck had started before me. And 2 other junior scientists. My role there was I was working at the bench. I was helping to teach and sort out cell culture techniques to be done in a specific way. I was spending a lot of time road mapping our science plans into the future with Beck and others. And I was spending a lot of my time hiring or thinking about hiring. Phase 2 was when we moved up to about 8 scientists. I had less day-to-day oversight over what was going on, but I still spent a lot of my time troubleshooting and working with the scientists. I was beginning to do a lot more team management. I was speaking with investors. I was still doing a lot of work around scientific road mapping and ideation. And again, I was spending a lot of my time on hiring. This is, if you think about an executive level role in any company, hiring is something you're going to be doing consistently. And then the final phase, this is where I'm at the moment, and I think I'm just about to begin a new phase shortly, but there's about 15 scientists at the moment. So a lot of my day is focused on team management, large project management, again, focused on road mapping and ideation, how the science team fits in amongst all these other functions of Val, and again, hiring. Just quickly, I will say that everything breaks with scale. All of the things that I used to do when it was just me, Beck, and 2 others didn't work once we got to a team of 8. And all of the things that I used to do when we were a team of 8, they stopped working when we got to a team of 15. So I had to stop and redo things in a brand new manner each time our team grew and doubled in size. And this is something that's a really important learning for me, is about company growth, and the way that you do things has to change as the company changes. So in terms of any advice that I can provide for everyone here on the call, there's more than I can provide here. But if you are thinking about coming into industry, then please feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to have a longer discussion with anyone who'd like to chat about it. But leaving academia can seem scary, and it absolutely is. It was something that I spent a lot of time agonizing over. But the payoff in terms of learning and career progression can be huge. You will get opportunities in industry that you won't necessarily get in academia. Thinking specifically about a small startup like Val, they are definitely risky. But even if the company that you go to work with fails, you're going to learn such an insane amount very quickly. And this is something that you can put on your CV, and it's going to make you such an attractive person for the next company that you go and join. If If you are applying for jobs in industry, know that the application process is very different to if you're trying to apply for a PhD program or a postdoc somewhere. Your academic track record around publications, around marks, they become a lot less relevant when it comes to applying for a role at industry. Make sure that you do your research on the company that you want to join, and make sure that you've got a great answer to the question, why do you want to come and join our company? It's one of the ones that I honestly, if you don't have a good answer to that question, then you probably won't make it through the next stage of our hiring process. And I've spoken to, I believe, I've assessed over 1,000 CVs for people to come and join VOW. And I think I've had somewhere between 100 and 200 phone calls with people who want to come and join VOW. And that question is one of the real differentiators early on. And then one last thing, and I think this is really, it's not specific to Australia, but it's very common. There is a sense amongst academics that if you leave academia, you have failed as an academic. And I want to tell you that that is absolute rubbish. You can succeed well and truly that by choosing to leave academia earlier. That leaving academia is definitely not a failure. There's so much out there that where you can extend yourself in a way that you just can't do if you try to stay within the fellowship program that within Australia academia, or in fact anywhere overseas as well. So I'll leave it there, and I'll let Beck go into a little bit more detail about her journey, because she is one of the founding members of VOW, and I'll look forward to questions at the end as well.
All right, great. Thank you so much, James. Yeah, those were some awesome tips for students and people just interested in working in the CellAg space. And we got some insider information for the hiring process of VOW, so that's really awesome. But now we'll hand it over to Beck Scarenci. So Beck is a passionate scientist working in her dream field, cellular agriculture. After completing a Bachelor of Science, majoring in biotechnology with honors, and gaining some industry experience in biopharmaceuticals, she fostered her interest in the well-being of animals and her knowledge of biotechnology to form the perfect combination of both. Beck was part of the founding team at VOW when she joined as the first employee and scientist of the startup in 2019. So welcome, Beck. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thanks as well, James, for that really awesome recap of your career journey. It's very inspirational. So I'm just going to try to share this quickly. My journey into science and into cultured meat is not exactly a conventional kind of way to get in. So I'll talk you guys through a little bit about my journey into science, because I'm relatively early in my career still, and then how I kind of worked my way into cultured meat. So when I was in my final year of high school, I really wanted to be a vet. And like a lot of people do, you kind of want to get work experience in your field. And this kind of was exactly what my life was. It was kind of like my idea of what being a vet was incredibly idealistic. And I pretty much thought I'd be able to play with puppies all day. But what actually happened when I went to do some work experience was a lot of this. And it wasn't exactly as glamorous as I thought. And I really just realized in that point that I didn't have the heart to be around sick animals all day. Because I'd always been an animal lover and always wanted to care for them. But that was a real kind of change in my decision on what I wanted to do in a career. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and I thought, all right, in school, like my best subjects are biology and chemistry. So I guess I should just follow science for now and see where that leads me. So I found this incredible degree at UTS, which was a flexible science degree. And what this meant was that you could go in as an undergrad and just not really have a major in mind yet. you would do the core subjects, so physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics. And then through that, if you chose specific subjects, you could actually lead yourself towards a major. So I started this, and in 2014, that was the first time that I heard of Professor Mark Post and his beef burgers that James was talking about earlier. So I was sitting in class and I was watching this video about it, and my friend sitting next to me was vegan, but I was a meat eater at the time. And I asked her, would you eat it? She said yes. And for me, that was just kind of like a turning point. I just thought, like, well, we have such different kind of views, but we can both eat the same thing. And it's something that seemed so restrictive for a vegan diet. But I was like, wow, you can actually really enjoy meat. So anyway, I finished my Bachelor of Biotechnology degree, and I was in a really fortunate position to have family connections who were neighbors of someone who worked at a lab. And it was a little bit here and there, but I eventually got in contact with the leader of a neurobiology lab. And this opportunity, this gave me the opportunity to work with stem cells. So these were induced pluripotent stem cells, and I won't go into too much of the details here, but in medical research, what stem cells are essentially the cells that can turn into anything. The problem with harvesting these cells is you usually need to get it from either bone marrow or a fetus, and there are ethical concerns around that. So what induced pluripotent stem cells allow you to do is actually just take like a very small piece of skin from a patient and then reprogram those cells into stem cells. And I just thought this was really cool. I wanted to get my hands on stem cells immediately. I knew it might have some application in cultured meat later on in my life, but that was really my priority at the time, was to get hands-on lab experience. So I did this project, and I was turning my stem cells into motor neurons. And honors, it was only a year long, so it was pretty intense. But towards the end of that year, I knew that I wasn't exactly ready just to get started into a PhD yet. But I tried to get into cultured meat. So I reached out to Supermeat in Israel and a company called Vitro Labs in San Francisco. And I was just trying to get my foot in the door really anywhere that I could, because there was nothing in Australia yet. Both of them turned me down and were essentially just like, you need more industry experience. So I applied for a job here in Sydney in a pharmaceutical company, and I got it. So I thought, all right, I will use this job to gain some industry experience. And in my mind, I thought, I'm going to have to, after this, do a PhD in something like muscle biology, and then I'll get into cultured meat. But it was kind of like I know what path I'm on, but this is just a stepping stone. So at NuClone, what they do is essentially, instead of using animals to produce antibodies for therapeutics, they do it without animals. They use cells instead. So they pretty much put the instructions of how to make therapeutics into cells that then grow in a big bioreactor. And in the liquid that they're surrounded in, that's where you can harvest the therapeutic from. So it takes the animal out of the equation, which I really liked. But it also gave me some really unique experience in cell line development, which was developing clonal cell lines, which are a population of cells that originally derived from one cell. And it's a really important part in what we do for the pharmaceuticals. And it's also something that can be applied to cultured meat as well. So I was doing this job, and it was in the incubator called Cicada in Redfern in Sydney. And while I was there, I signed up to a meetup, which was all about synthetic biology. And this is kind of where like my luck just kind of turned. And I was incredibly fortunate to just have this whole series of really fortunate events happen. But I signed up to this synthetic biology meetup. And then I got an email from the organizer which happened to be George, the co-founder of Val. And he put up this really enticing post saying that if you share it on LinkedIn, you'll be in the running to win a free t-shirt. So I thought, okay, great. I want the t-shirt, which I never got in the end, but I got the dream job. So that was fine. But I added him on LinkedIn, and within a day or two, he had messaged me asking if we could go for coffee. And I was like, sure, why not? With no idea really that he wanted to start this cultured meat company. And at that point, we sat down and he essentially said, my co-founder and I, we want to start a cultured meat company. It didn't have a name yet. It wasn't Val, but it was just an idea at that point in time. He pretty much said, do you have free time and do you want to work pretty much for free and just kind of see if we can put something together? So I very quickly put my hand up and said, yep, I'm free before 9 and after 5. So luckily our first lab for Val was in the same building as my old work. So we were all working full-time jobs, and we got our first biopsy of the pig and kangaroo. And within that 6-month time frame, we managed to set up a cell culture system in this tiny lab that was half the size of my bedroom. And we got to the point where we actually produced the meat for the kangaroo dumpling and the pork ragu. Then we got our round of investment, like James was talking about. We had this proof of concept, and that way George and Tim were able to go to investors and say, hey, look at what we've been able to do, give us money and we'll do more of it. So yeah, then so we reached out on LinkedIn, had coffee. Then yeah, so the 4 of us at the beginning, we were able to reach that point where the company had enough money to kind of pay us salaries. We all quit our full-time jobs, and from that point, the rest is kind of history. James did allude to kind of what happened beyond that point, but we convinced James to jump over to the dark side of industry. And yeah, then we got our first robot, which was pretty cool because Val has a very heavy focus on automation and engineering. And yeah, in my time at Val, I've really dipped my toe into all of these different things, which I won't read out, but really like a bit of recruitment, project management, and then on the science side, growing cells from different species, animal component-free media, biomaterials. It's just been a wealth of information, and a lot of my experience from honors growing stem cells and new clone in cell line development. A lot of that has actually paid off in this role. So I definitely wouldn't be where I am without that prior experience. So yeah, it's just some words of advice for anyone kind of considering getting into the space. Get hands-on work experience any way you can, whether this is just volunteering or paid, or just do it as much as you can. Like my experience, this opportunity, I mean, it could have gone nowhere, or it could have gone somewhere, and it ended up going somewhere. So that was a really good decision. Look out for things like internships and research projects or early career placements. We have the junior research program at Val, which is our JRS program, and it's essentially a 6-month program where you can come and work in all of the fields in the science team. And then the really successful candidates sometimes get a job at the end of it, a full-time role. So it's a really great way to just put get your foot in the door. Keep an open mind as well. I'm really glad that I said no to veterinary science. Otherwise, I would have spent 7 years studying and realized at the end that it wasn't for me. So you're bound to change your mind. Like, I think it's 5 to 7 times in your career. So just keep it open. And yeah, connect with people on LinkedIn and Twitter, because I think if I hadn't reached out to, or if I hadn't added George on LinkedIn, I mean, none of this really would have happened. So yeah, that's all I've got for today. But happy to answer questions in the Q&A for everyone.
All right, thank you so much, Beck. Yeah, so I think CellAg as a field is quite new. And so, the pathway into that space is not immediately clear for a lot of people, including myself, right? So it's awesome hearing how you got into CellAg as well as James, from a related but different field of research. And we also have a lot of biotech students here, as I mentioned before, because we're collaborating with the Biotech Club. So thanks for sharing with us the pathways that students might take to get into this space. And also one day, maybe if we get merch, we'll get you a t-shirt, Beck.
Thanks.
All right, great. So thank you, James and Beck, for your talks, and we'll now move on to the panel discussions and Q&A. We will also be taking a group photo after formally closing the event, so make sure you stay for that if you like to appear for the photo and get a photo with these two legends. You can submit your questions on Slido for me to ask, or you can raise your hand and I will call out for you to unmute and ask your questions. I already see some questions on the Slido, so I'm going to go with that. First of all, what is your daily experience working at a hip cultivated meat startup like Vow? Would you like to go first, Beck?
Yeah, sure. Working at a hip startup. I honestly, like, every day is different, especially so in the early days. I mean, like, I think my first official day as a full-time person, I kind of sat down and we just wrote post-it notes of things that we needed to do. And I was doing things like writing up the OH&S protocols and, organizing a new pipette gun and doing, ordering and a little bit of recruitment and writing questions for interviews. So yeah, every day has been really quite unique. But more recently, as the team has grown and like people have more specific responsibilities, a lot of my time at least is spent project managing and figuring out the direction of the of how we want to run our science on the particular project that I'm working on, coupled with a healthy amount of lab work as well. There's no scientist that doesn't do any lab work at BAO, so it's always a good balance of that. But yeah, a lot of meetings as well with our awesome team. But things kind of just come and go kind of spontaneously. At a startup, you kind of just have to be ready to pivot and just say, all right, that didn't work, and we're going to focus on that, which is it. I think it's probably a key difference between academia and industry, is that in academia, it's more of a process, whereas in industry, you can just decide at midday on one day that you're going to totally pivot your attention and you can run with it. So yeah.
Thank you. James, do you have anything to add as well?
No, I think Bex answered it nicely. And to be honest, I don't get the opportunity to work in a hip and happening, awesome, cool place because I'm Melbourne based. So with COVID and lockdown, I haven't had the opportunity to get up to Val since February this year. So it's been a while since I've been in the hip, cool startup environment as opposed to my study in my house.
I see. Well, I hope, after this lockdown, hopefully we can all go to Sydney and visit Val. All right. So next question we have. All right. So James, you mentioned that you guys nearly have 35 employees now. Congratulations on that. So we were wondering, how multidisciplinary is this team?
Hugely. So even just looking within the science team, that you would think that a cultured meat company would have a lot of people with a lot of expertise on muscle or meat or working with muscle stem cells. And in actual fact, there is only me and one other person on our team of 15 who have previously worked with muscle cells before. In any large context. Everyone else comes from a range of different backgrounds. And to be honest, as we build the science team, one of the things that we are really focused on is getting people who are just awesome at what they do. So I don't want to build a team of 15 people who know muscle stem cell biology. We would ultimately end up with 15 people with exactly the same ideas. So instead of that, what we've done is get 15 people who are just incredibly motivated, have clear demonstration of achieving excellence in their career or their personal lives, and are just really, really awesome at what they do. And because we've built that diversity across our team, we get so many different solutions coming to answer the many questions that we've got. Outside of the science team, we've got, as I mentioned at the start of my talk, we've got science, we've got software engineers. The engineering team have been an absolute godsend. That one of the big differences I find between my previous life working at the uni and my job at Vow is that we develop a new assay and we run that assay, and that assay might be imaging of a 6-well plate. Once we've done that, we then say, all right, we can image six wells manually today. How do we do that 1,000 times tomorrow? So how do we now image 6,000 plates tomorrow? And the engineering team is what allows us to do that. And that's exactly what we've done. So we've moved away from working with 6-well plates, and we're now working with 384-well plates. We've got liquid handling, we've got robotics, we've got automated microscopy, we've got machine learning, image analysis. So many things have been automated because of our partnership with the engineering team.
Thank you. Actually, I see another question. Wait, sorry, Jada, I see your hand raised as well. One more question before I give it to you. Is there someone we could reach out about the path to non-scientific roles, like strategy or operations? Someone asks.
I would say just keep an eye on both LinkedIn and our website for those details. And one of the other things that you could do is our website has a link to our blog posts as well. And I know that we've recently, our head of operations, Ellen, has just recently published a great post about her journey to Vow as well, and what it's like being the head of operations at Vow. So those are some really great resources to start with.
All right, great. Jaden, take it away. What is your question?
Thank you very much, James and Rebecca, for the great presentation. The question I had, it's kind of like, I already asked on Slido as well, but like, are like genetically modified cells ever on the table, or is the public perception of like GM a bit too like negative at this point in time for that to be like considered?
I'll let Beck answer this because Beck knows my answer to this question.
Okay, I was going to say what you were going to say. So look, in terms of consumer acceptance and Australian regulation in particular, genetic modification is probably not the kind of thing that we want to be linking to our first product. Because we've already got such a huge hurdle just to cover in terms of not only regulation, but also consumer acceptance. It's a whole other hurdle to put a big GM stamp on the label. So no plans at all to incorporate that. There are companies in the world that have explicitly said that they are working with genetically modified cells. That's not the path that Val wants to go down. Especially getting into an Australian market, and even just getting into the Singaporean market, which is the most accepting government so far, or regulating agency. That is also something that they're keeping an eye on as well, is the genetic modification of cells. So yeah, at this point, it's probably not something that we're focusing on.
Thank you.
I will say that it will be something that we look into that moving forwards, but that getting people to eat both cultured meat and GM just becomes one step too far too quickly. Let's get everyone excited about eating cultured meat first, and then once they get used to that, then we can think about GM.
Yeah. I'll also add there's I think there are some species that might actually require genetic modification to get, like, for example, the woolly mammoth or the thylacine. If we do want to start producing meat from those kinds of animals, of course, those animals don't exist yet at the moment. They're extinct. So rather than going through the de-extinction process of the whole animal, if we can code their DNA in cells and actually have them growing in cell culture, or exactly T-Rex meat, that's something we would have to look at genetic modification for. So yeah, it really depends how creative we want to get.
Wonderful. I had another question about the regulatory approval. I just wanted to confirm, is Val working with regulators here, trying to get these products into the market?
Loosely, yes. It's the Australian market is not our top priority at the moment. So the path to approval in Australia for a novel food is not a short path. It's a multi-year process. So please don't hold your breath for anything to be available within Australia within the next 1 to 2 years. That a number of other markets will open up well before the Australian market. And I think that hopefully what we'll see is that as it opens up across other markets, that Australia will begin to follow suit. But yeah, we definitely won't see products on shelves in Australia any time in the near future.
I see. So you guys mentioned very interesting animals that I hadn't even considered, like extinct animals. So this, raises another question. So are there any considerations of the types of animals you're looking at, or, is there a criterion or a limit on the kind of animal, or is truly anything possible?
So I can give you my thoughts, and Beck probably has a number of things herself. I'm not ready to talk too much about Tyrannosaurus Rex burgers just yet. I think we might be a little while off before we go down the extinct route. But the challenge is, can we isolate the cells from whatever species that we're thinking about, and then can we culture them? So I suggested something like a bee early on. Someone else I saw a wasp. I think that insect cells, there's a lot of opportunity there to create something that has never before been thought about as a food. If we can grow cells at a scale that to start producing steak-sized pieces of wasp meat, that we can start producing something it's not something that's ever been considered. That previously, that it could be that it tastes absolutely terrible, but that we just don't know. And until we try it, that we're not going to know. We don't have really much in the way of detail around the nutritional profile of something like that either. So there's a lot to really like about exploring species beyond the big 4 or 5 species that we normally work with, in terms of both taste profiles, in terms of nutrition. I mean, who doesn't love the idea of taking that really, really rich flavor of a kangaroo steak and mixing it with just a really creamy, flavorful experience of duck fat? So suddenly you've got kangaroo meat and duck fat together to produce this incredible taste inside your mouth. And I think that, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities that we've never explored before as we start thinking about cultured meat.
Yeah,
Great. And that transition, oh, sorry, did you want to say something as well, Beck?
No, I was just going to say you absolutely covered that beautifully. Yeah, the thing that really kind of interests me in terms of cell biology from different animals are things like, for example, how reptiles can kind of drop their tail, and then those cells can really quickly proliferate, and that tissue is so regenerative. That's a really interesting kind of target for us to see what is so special about those cells that let them literally regrow a whole limb, because that's something that we don't really see in mammals. So it's another really enticing thing to look at different species.
Amazing. What James said earlier, it relates to my next question, actually, about how, the first beef burger was produced by Mark Post in 2013, and it was quite simple. It was like a lot of muscle cells. But we want to know, what improvements are Vow making to make their cultivated meat products tastier and perhaps healthier as well?
Yeah, so look, it's a really good question. That we've all seen that you can make a burger out of muscle cells, and so that's no longer exciting. That was really made out of beef cells. So again, Mark Post and Mosa run into this problem of, if this burger doesn't taste what I'm used to, I'm probably not going to buy it again. I've got a really clear idea in my mind of what a beef burger tastes like, and this needs to taste the same. So in terms of improvements upon that, I would say that Vow, we're not necessarily trying to improve on that. What we're trying to do is create something so brand new that it's not an incremental step up from something that you've experienced before. It's an entirely new category of food that we're aiming for here. Yes, we're definitely looking at different cell types and mixing different cell types, but we're also doing things like partnering with Nourish, who are using precision fermentation to produce animal fats at an incredible speed and scale. And by using that, we can sort of generate the flavor and the taste profiles that we're really looking for in terms of being able to mix our cells with their fat with other plant-based ingredients to get to this new products that we're looking for.
Thank you. I have another question from Anonymous. Okay, what is the greatest challenge to growing or developing cell cultured meat? Pretty general question.
Beck's our at the bench scientist, so she would be a great person to answer this one.
Yeah, I think for me, the way I see it is the biggest challenge is scale, and that's not only like the equipment that we use, like, how big can a bioreactor get, or can we, take over the breweries next door and use those? It's actually also the biological scale. So cells will naturally reach a limit in how many times they can actually proliferate or how many times they can double. One of the biggest challenges that we face is trying to find cells that naturally will grow past that limit. And what that allows us to do is it stops our reliance on biopsies from animals, which is one of the key fundamental cause of VOW, is that we don't want to keep going back to biopsies. And it means that from one cell, instead of theoretically being able to make 10 kilos, one cell can theoretically make an infinite amount of meat. So that is one of the key challenges, is finding those cells and harnessing those ones so that we can reach the scale that we need to be able to feed billions of people, which is our ultimate mission as a company.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Wow, time has gone so fast already. It's already 4:57, so it's time to wrap up. But I actually see another raised hand, which I feel tempted to get Brody to come ask his question. So Brody, come on and ask your question. Last question. Oh, there's one more question left, but Brody, you can.
Yeah.
Question.
Thanks, Marion. Hi, James. Hi, Beck.
Hey,
I was just wondering, when you expand, are you going to design your own bioreactors, or are you going to partner with another bioreactor company like you're partnering with Nourish to make your fats?
Good question. I will say that in terms of proliferating cells, our goal is to not have to design and produce bespoke bioreactors for the proliferation of cells.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So it's almost time to wrap up. So the last question would be, do you have any advice for people thinking about starting a CellAg career or business? I know you touched on it before, but if you have any last minute comments, this would be the time.
Look, my immediate response is to just get involved with the community. There are so many opportunities that join something like the CellAg Australia not-for-profit run by Bianca, that follow companies, not just Australian-based companies, but all of the companies on social media. All of them are posting regular updates and interesting things on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and probably Instagram as well. So look through all of those things and just, get involved.
Yeah, 100% echo what James said. I think one thing that stuck out to me when I was, so I was approached by someone in asking how do they stand out in the recruitment process. And I asked around everyone in the management team at VOW, like, really, what really stands out? And one of our co-founders said, if someone can demonstrate that they can solve a problem that we face, it's a lot more likely that we'll really consider bringing them on board. So if you have the opportunity, or if you can think of different things that, cultured meat might be facing, try to think of solutions, put hacky fixes together. That's the kind of stuff that we love. It's a new up and coming industry. So I would just say, try to use your innovation, use inspiration from other companies, but if you can solve a problem for us when you come to us, or when you go to any cultured meat company, to be honest, you could even just start your own if you've got something brand new, but that's a really key way to stand out in the field.
Awesome. Thank you for your last words. That was a really fun time for me, and I hope that everyone found this session quite interesting, and it gave some new ideas of how they could get involved in the cellular agriculture space. So thank you again, James and Beck, and everyone for joining us today. There will be a group photo right after this recording ends, so make sure you stay for that if you would like to join us. There's also a feedback survey that you can complete, and this is for us to know how to improve our events in the future, and the link will be in the chats and also on the event page. But anyways, that's all from us, and thank you all so much for coming, and we hope to see you next time.